Welcome to Bible study at Our Lady of the Wayside. We're getting toward the end of the year, and the days are getting a little darker, and the readings are getting a little darker too. And we're in the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew every so often gives us a section of discourse and then a section of parables. And the parables in the early part of his gospel tend to be kind of cheerful. The sower and the seed, things like that, the lilies of the field. Now we're past Palm Sunday in Matthew. So the situation is getting darker. Jesus is getting more focused on giving us what we need to know before he dies and ascends to heaven. And we get to make decisions. He is inviting us to make decisions. In the meantime, the scribes and the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders are trying to make their decisions about Jesus. And next week, we're going to see one of the many traps that they set for him, because they're looking for a capital charge they can bring against him. But what we have this week is a couple of parables. The scholars say that there are two parables, and they've been merged into one story, probably by Matthew being efficient. That was my speculation. But what I want to talk about now in the few minutes that we have available to share is the fashion statement at the end of the gospel, because it can be kind of confusing. The first part of the gospel is going to talk about God in his loving heart, which we see in the first reading from Isaiah. We see God making a huge invitation to people to come to the wedding feast of his son. And then some people blow it off because they have other things to do. And God sends, in the second half of the parable, or the second parable, he sends out an invitation to the riffraff in the highways and the byways. And so bring in everybody, not just the ones who got the save the date invitation in the first part of the parable. Bring in everybody. But then he finds somebody who isn't wearing a wedding garment. And what most of us would think as contemporary Americans, well, why do you expect some homeless guy that you dragged in off the street to be wearing a tuxedo, or homeless gal to be not wearing a cocktail dress? And we think, well, what is God thinking here? Well, let me tell you, Les and I went to a Jewish wedding, and this is a modern Jewish wedding. But when we arrived, dressed to the nines, of course, some young men met us at the door and offered Les a yarmulke, a skull cap, in the color of the bridesmaids' dresses. And all the guys were wearing these. It was given at the door. And they were very gracious. They said, you don't have to wear this, but of course he did. And so what we're seeing in this second reading is the second half of the parable is not that people aren't coming to the wedding fully, dressed fancy. What we're seeing is that not only do you have a choice whether to come at all, which is the first half, but you've got a choice whether to come on God's terms or to insist on coming on your own terms. Are you willing to accept? Are we willing to accept the grace that God offers us to clothe us to be ready for heaven? Not that we've earned it, but that he's given it, and are we willing to accept it? And the tie-in in the church that we see is that when a baby is baptized, they get a white garment, or a little something or another, depending on what the ladies of the parish have been making in that particular parish. But this white garment as a sign of the salvation gift that is given by God. And then if you go to a Catholic funeral, you see the white cloth being put over the coffin as a reminder of that white garment, not as something that someone brought on their own, but something that God has given by his grace. So the challenge to us, get your heart happy with the Isaiah reading, have a good focus on the third reading, and then in the middle reading, we're going to see the context for that bumper sticker, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, which does not mean I can fly a plane, I can sew a tuxedo, I can cook a meal. No, it doesn't mean that I can do all things or that I can multitask.
But Paul could make tents, though.
He could make tents, like Kevin says. So we'll have an intense Bible study meeting. And if you'd like information about Bible study at Our Lady of the Wayside, email BibleStudy@olwparish.org. Hope to see you either in person.